39. Trev's Hockey Show. I'm the Trev. You know that. If you're tuning in, if you're watching, it's too sweet. Double horn in it today. As of this moment, we have done more videos on this channel than we did on the original channel under the Hockey Show playlist. I'll show you. So if you're one of those guys who came over to this channel knowing that this was happening after seeing the Facebook post or watching the video where I was talking about making the separate channels, thanks for coming along. I'm glad you're here. But anyway, I'm getting off topic. We're continuing with hockey history today. And I'm getting us out of the 90s because I feel like I've talked about the 90s a little too much already. We're going to the 70s. Yeah. Fun times in the 70s. More specifically, we're talking about the 1974 draft. And I'm sure there's probably a lot of videos on this subject already. And that's fine. This is my video on the subject now. Today I'm talking about the player who never was, but still managed to get drafted by an NHL team. Talking about Taro Tsujimoto. So again, the time frame here is 1974. This is before internet. This is before cell phones. This is before television contracts for NHL draft coverage. Back then, the draft wasn't even covered on TV. So, basically, the only way you found out who was drafted by who and in what spot was to read about it the next day or watch it on the news. That's it. And on top of that, the NHL-WHA rivalry was in full effect. And the NHL was always worried about losing picks to the WHA. So they did it secretly and by telephone. So you can imagine how long that would take. I could imagine it was very, very excruciating to have to sit there, wait for the call. Okay, who do you pick? And then if you get the pick duplicated, say you pick some guy who Toronto already picked or some guy that Vancouver picked, then you have to go back to your guys, talk about it some more and pick someone else and then hope that that guy hadn't been picked. The thing about the 74 draft was it was long. And by the time the 11th round rolled around, one guy in particular, Punch Imlach, you might remember him. He won 4 cups with Toronto. He was the general manager of the Sabres at the time. Was rather impatient and getting pretty fed up at the same time. And he already drafted who he felt were enough players, at least enough quality players, that he wanted to put on his team. He had drafted Derek Smith in round 10. He had drafted Lee Fogelein and Danny Gare in the first 2 rounds. So at that point, he was content. He was good with the guys who he picked. But he couldn't leave it at that. He couldn't say, oh, well, we're done. We're forfeiting everything else. See ya. Couldn't do that. You still had to take your picks. So instead of giving in to being bored and giving in to being frustrated, he decided to have a little fun with this. So he grabbed his PR guy, Paul Weiland, to help him create a fictitious player. Now, Weiland wanted the player to be of Asian descent, and he knew instantly where the last name would come from. As a college student, he'd drive down Route 16 from Buffalo to St. Bonaventure and would pass a store all the time, which was named Tsujimoto. So that was the name. At the same time, I guess he knew the guy who ran Tsujimoto's store and asked him if he could have his consent to use his name. He didn't divulge why. He didn't divulge the purpose. He said, "Can I use your last name?" To which Joshua Tsujimoto, the name of the guy who owned Tsujimoto's, said, "Sure, why not?" At the same time, Weiland also asked Tsujimoto what is a popular name amongst Japanese males. And apparently the most popular name at the time was Toro. Go figure, right? And then he also Weiland asked Tsujimoto, what is the name for a saber or a sword in Japanese, which became katana. Katana is named for all their blades in Japan, apparently. So with the 183rd pick in the 1974 NHL Entry Draft, Amateur Draft, it was the Amateur Draft at the time, sorry, the Buffalo Sabres selected from the Tokyo Kitanas, Taro Tsujimoto. The NHL recognized this, and it was reported by every media outlet out there, including the Hockey News. And it was put into print, so the pick was made official. Now, this wasn't a completely unfounded thing for teams to draft outside Canada. They were picking players from the States, so they were branching North American wide. At the time, they were dipping into the Scandinavian pool, players from Sweden, players from Finland, other European nations, not the Soviet Union, because at the time it was still height of the Cold War. The Soviet Union was still off limits. That was a no-no. You don't draft Soviet players. So to draft guys in that unusual place wasn't necessarily something that raised a lot of eyebrows, but it was an Asian player. There's never been an Asian player up at that point. So naturally it became a thing, but no one else was in on the joke. So as the story kept making its round in NHL publications and print and all that stuff, Punch Imlach didn't acknowledge that the pick was fake until just before the start of training camp, when the media outlet were going to the airport to meet this Taro Tsujimoto, and he didn't show up. I suppose you could only sit there with a straight face for so long before you're finally like, hey, guys, I pulled one on you. And good on him for doing something like that. I mean, you need some kind of creative vent or outlet in a situation like that where it's a time-consuming process in what you're sitting in. But after that, Clarence Campbell, the NHL president at the time, president, there wasn't commissioners at the time, he didn't think that was all too funny. And from everything I've tried to look for, the Sabres weren't really punished for it. I mean, they did change pick 183 in round 11 to an invalid claim, and some sources went and completely removed it altogether. It went from 182 to 184, with no mention of what 183 was or by who, none of that. They just completely bypass it. Almost like in an elevator, when there's a 13th floor, some of them just go 11, 12, 14. There's no 13 button because that's bad. But as far as I know, the Sabres were not punished financially. They weren't given suspensions, nothing like that. They're given a slap on the wrist with mean mug from Clarence Campbell. But that was that. But if Punch had remained just a little more patient, or at least had better scouting sitting beside him, he could have drafted some guy named Dave Lumley, who won 2 cups with the Oilers. He could have drafted Stephen Pearson, who won 4 cups with the Islanders. There were still lots of players that could have been picked, but I get where Punch was coming from. It's like, this is tedious, it's monotonous, I'm just done. And I'm sure if I was in his shoes, I'd done the same thing. It wasn't until 1992, though, that an actual Japanese player would get drafted in the NHL, when the Montreal Canadiens selected Hiroki Miura. And like Tsujimoto, he never did play in the NHL. There was a player that was Japanese, though, that did play in the NHL. And that player was Yatuka Fukufuji, who played for the LA Kings. He only played 4 games. But he still had a Japanese player playing in the NHL. And the legend of Tsujimoto has not died. To this day, you can still see some fans rocking Sabres jerseys, either wearing the number 13 or the number 74 with Tsujimoto on the back. Right around 74, 75, even beyond that. If the game was one-sided against the Sabres, the fans would chant, "We want Taro." There would oftentimes be banners hanging in the in the stands that would say Taro says, and then have some witty comment behind that. And in 2011, Panini, the hockey card company, well, they're more baseball, basketball, and football now, but they did do hockey cards once upon a time. Their score brand actually released a Taro Tsujimoto hockey card, which I'll show you right now. So to say that a good time and a good prank did not have an impact, oh, it did. It did. And I'll give Punch Imlach credit for having the brain to think up something like that, just for a laugh. But that was episode 39 of Trev's Hockey Show. I want to thank you for tuning in. Your viewership always means so much to me. Always has, always will. Leave a comment in the comment section. Let me know what you guys think of this topic, what you guys thought of this video, even what you thought of the character. If you want to, give me that thumbs up if you like this. If you really want to, there's that little red button. You can smack that thing. Stay up to date with all the content I'm putting out. You can find Trev's Trade page on Facebook at Trev's Trade page. You can find the parent channel on Facebook at Trev's TV. You can also find me on Instagram at Rockstar Trev TV. Moving forward, probably going back to the retired numbers. I've been putting off the one I want to do and putting it off and putting it off. But the longer I put it off, the longer it's going to take to make. So that one's coming. I might start talking about other things, still hockey related to hockey history, but we'll know when we get there. Either way, in the meantime, and in between time, be on the lookout for more videos from Trev. Later.